Hi, I'm Paul from the Studio Rats. Today is another quite exciting day. I'm getting quite a lot of those at the moment. But today we're looking at the brand new amp, or the prototype of the brand new amp, which is going to be the Studio Rats custom amp from Cornell. Now, I can't tell you how privileged I feel to be part of this, because this is a collaboration between us, the Studio Rats, myself and James, and Cornell. And what's been happening over the last few months is we've been sort of planning and building this amp, or I should say Dennis has been building this amp, because I haven't got a clue how to do stuff like that. I'll show you the amp, and don't worry, it's not going to look like this. This is just the prototype, but you can see all the controls that we're going to have on it, and I'm going to go through some of the tones on this amp. So what we're trying to do with this amp is create my ideal amp. So my favorite amp of all time is my Matchless Independence 35, but a Matchless Independence 35 is incredibly expensive. So my amp, I think, is about, with the cabinet, it's about £5 now. So it's a really expensive amp, and it's not the most perfect amp in the world. There's still things about this amp that I would like to change, and that's what we're doing with this amp. So let me go through what this amp is. This is an EL84 based amp. It's 20 watts, switchable down to 5 watts from this switch here. We've gone for an ECC 83 preamp valve, because what I really like is that sort of matchless tone. We've got a valve driven reverb, which is going to be optional, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. Even though this is a matchless style amplifier, what we've gone for at the moment, and this is just a prototype, this might change, but we've gone for a Marshall style tone stack. So we're trying to blend all of my favorite things into one amp. So let's have a look at all the controls on the amp. We've got 2 inputs at the moment. Now, I don't know if that's going to stay, whether we need 2 inputs. We've got a high and a low input, but maybe we'll just stick with 1 input, just like my Matchless, because to be honest, that's really all I plug into. So we've got the gain control, we've got a tone control, then we've got a cut control. Now, one of my favorite things on my Matchless amplifier is my cut control. It's a real subtle thing, but it just takes off that harshness. If you've got like a spiky guitar, something like a Telecaster, you can just dial it out in a really nice way. Then we've got a master volume. Personally, I think a master volume is quite an important thing, especially if you want to run this amp at home, because it's going to be incredibly loud. If you want to drive that preamp, you're really going to need to turn down the master, especially at home. And then last of all, we've got this reverb control. This amp's going to be point to point, all hand wide, so it's going to be quite a special thing. And what we're trying to do with this is to keep the price down, so it's not going to be as expensive as a lot of hand wide, point to point boutique amps. But we don't know exactly yet what the cost's going to be. We have to sort of finalize the design and see what exactly is going to be inside it. Now, the reason why this is getting built is because I think that there are loads of amps out there that sound fantastic, but not exactly right for me. Now, what I mean by that is a lot of amplifiers go for this sort of pedal platform sort of amplifier, but every time that I try a pedal platform style amp, it never has enough gain. Everyone sort of bases this sort of pedal platform on a really clean sounding amp, and to me, that's not the ideal way of running pedals. What I like to do from my amplifiers is to get a little bit of dirt on the front end and then run pedals into that. I tend to find overdrive pedals work really, really well if you do that, and they lose some of that harshness that you get from a lot of pedal platform style amps. So that is why we designed this, because it's going to do exactly that. So let me just show you what the amp sounds like with any reverb or any effects on it. So it cleans up really, really nicely. So you can get some really nice sort of vintage drive tones out of it. Now this is not going to be a high gain amp at all. That's not really what we want, because what we want is to get the ideal amp that you can stick pedals in front of to get that sort of clean on the verge of breakup sound, but then when you add the pedals, you can really get any sort of gain stage that you want. Now, as I said, the reverb on this amp is going to be an optional extra. Now, for me, when I'm in the studio, I tend not to use amplifier reverb. I tend to use plugins because I can get a much better more polished sound from using plugins than using, say, like a spring reverb. If I want to use a spring reverb and I want to get that sort of sound, then I would always use a spring reverb. But when I go out live, I always like to have a touch of reverb on the amp. Now, the great thing about this reverb is it's not one of those sort of massive reverbs. It's quite a subtle thing. So let me just show you what you can get out of it. So there's the reverb tank that we've got in it at the moment. Now this might change, we might put a bigger tank in there. It all is up in the air at the moment, but I just want to show you how we're getting on with the prototype. Now, always in my signal chain, I've got a boost pedal, and at the moment I'm using this Jam Pedals Boomster, which is one of my favorite boost pedals because it's got so many options on it. But if I use it on the clean boost setting, let me show you what you can do just by putting the guitar into the boost pedal and then into the front of the amp, and how hard you can drive the front of the amp. It breaks up in a really nice way, and you don't get any of that sort of front end flood that you can get from a lot of amps, especially more Fender style amps. So next, let's try a couple of overdrive pedals. I've got my Earthquaker Devices Palisades, which is one of my favorite overdrive pedals, going in the front end. And there's two settings on this. What you can do with it, you can have like a more sort of tube screamer style overdrive, and then you can kick in gain B, which brings it into a more sort of 80s sort of drive tones, or 80s lead tone, I should say. One of the other stipulations that I really wanted with this amp was for it to sound great with all guitars. So if you've got single coils and that's your preference, then that's great. But also if you want to switch over to humbuckers, even using the same EQ, it still sounds great. So I'm not going to touch the EQ on the amp, and I've changed over to my Sir Pete Thorne guitar. This is quite a bright sounding humbucker, to be fair, but I'm going to show you how it sounds now with humbuckers. So there you go. I think we're sort of at the mid sort of stage with this amp, so things might change a little bit, but this is a short video and I just wanted to show you the sort of progress that we're making with it. And personally, how fantastic I think this amp sounds. Now, this is personally exactly what I want from an amp. There's a couple of little tweaks that I want to do. I want to get a little bit more sizzle on the top end, but let me know if there's any features that you guys want to see on this amp, because ideally we're building this amp for you guys. Anyway, I really hope you guys got something out of this video. If you did get something out of it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Click on the bell button and you'll be notified of any future video that comes out from the Studio Rats. I'm Paul, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.